The Montreal Canadiens made the playoffs last year by the skin of their teeth, defying all the odds at every turn, and did so post-Four Nations. Ken Hughes put it at the feet of his captain. You don't want me to trade your friends and teammates? Well, then do something about it. And something they did in a massive, massive way. And here's the crazy part. They did it without a second line. I mean, they had bodies on a second line, but my goodness gracious, compared to all the other teams that made the playoffs, the Canes didn't have a second line. So let's spend a few minutes talking about line number 2 and who's on it, because let me inject my point of view right off the top here. Obviously, Demidov right now starts my season on line number 2. Zachary Bolduc is the X factor to me, but the bigger X factor is who's going to play down the middle. And I have 2 propositions for you and a question. How patient are they going to be with Kirby Dach? Because he's proposition player number 1. Proposition player number 2 for me is, are they going to make a trade with Anaheim for Mason McTavish, who appears, according to several NHL insiders, maybe minds have been made up in Southern California as it relates to Mason McTavish. So let me start with, Marco, your point of view in how patient Hughes and St. Louis and Gordon are going to be to allow the Canadiens to establish a second line. Let's start with Kirby Dach.
Yeah, I think they're going to be patient with Kirby Dach. Jeff Gordon told us in our interview with him that Kirby, they're comfortable with the centers that they have right now. They're obviously still on the lookout if one becomes available, but they're not going to sell the farm for a second line center that may not fit or that may require an overpay that may not be the right guy. You brought up Mason McTavish. I think that's a lot of smoke when it comes to Mason McTavish. It's a lot of smoke. Yeah. At first it was, Pat Verbeek's not signing any of his RFAs. Then he signs Hellison. He signs Dostal. Yeah. I don't think McTavish is far. I think a lot of people will look at the McTavish situation and just assume that things aren't going well because of the way that things went down with Trevor Zegras. Yep. But in terms of what my colleagues are hearing in Orange County, it doesn't seem like there's this disappointment that some of the bigger insiders are pointing out there. I think this is just off-season hockey talk. Do I think that Mason McTavish could eventually be traded from Anaheim? Yeah, it's a possibility. I would think so, but I wouldn't view the signing of Mikael Granlund, who is in his mid-30s,
he's 33,
and the drafting of Roger McQueen, who's easily 2 years away, as being the necessity to try and move out a guy like Mason McTavish. This team wants to make the playoffs next year. You don't hire Joel Quenneville to not make the playoffs. You don't go through all that to not make the playoffs. You don't take on Chris Kreider for free because you're trying to not make the playoffs. This is a team that's actively trying to make the playoffs. And unless they get their biggest weakness, which is a top pair right shot defenseman, quelled by way of trade, I don't see a reason why they would move that. And people that are considering offer sheets, my guys, try it. Anaheim has all the cap space in the world. I don't necessarily think they're going to blink and, matching a $10 million offer sheet, to be completely honest with you. It just means that they're going to have to be smarter in other contracts, which they were. I mean, Dostal at $6.5 million for 5 years, I think is a smart move. I think it's a money move. I think that he is going to quickly become one of the better goaltenders in the NHL. So to me, it's Verbeek has always been this way with his RFAs. So I see the smoke. That I see the talk. I see that I saw that Jeff Marek said that he's never been more available, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is available. That just means that there's reason to doubt that he could be available. But that's the thing. If teams are considering offer sheets, it's because Anaheim doesn't want to know anything about a trade.
Right.
So that's the idea. But at the same time,
the smoke had cleared because they, when they dealt Trevor Zegras. And he goes to where do you go? Philadelphia. When he goes to the Flyers, they're like, okay, well, they made up their mind, and that locked in Mason McTavish even further. And then time moved on, and here we are in July, and Jeff Marek is having the opinions that he's having and sharing those opinions. You're like, here's the smoke again. It's billowing once more around Mason McTavish and Anaheim. I'm not saying the Canadiens are closely connected, but hear me out for a second. What if Suzuki's having another great year? Caulfield, Demidov, Slafkovsky got off to a better start. Montembeault's doing his job. Lane Hudson followed up on his rookie season. Caden Gooley's playing injury-free and looking good. I just don't see a world where the Canadiens can be that patient waiting for Kirby Dach to learn how to play 2C at a high level. That's what makes this a fascinating talking point in my mind is gauging how patient they're going to be if the rest of the team around Kirby Dach is doing really well. Gaspillage, comme on dit au Québec. They don't want to waste that. They can't waste that.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, again, the opportunity cost is going to be through the roof, right? Because he's got no trade protection. If he is made available, the whole league is going to get involved.
Agreed.
And so the Canadiens
they have other options,
really,
Montreal. They don't have to go, they got Newhook, they could try Demidov, they could try Bolduc there. They got options.
Yeah. But I think that there's more value in the Canadiens trying to jumpstart Kirby Dach than there is trying to go out and deplete themselves necessarily for a Mason McTavish. And I say that because your first round pick, your B prospect, and so, like a third pair defenseman or a bottom six forward is not what's going to move the needle in this case. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, you thought that Noah Dobson was going to cost more than they did. That was situational. He forced himself out of the New York Islanders.
Yeah, true.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Mason McTavish cannot.
No.
Well, he can't. He has no arbitration.
Correct.
He has no arbitration. He has no trade protection. You can't get that before you're 7 years in the league anyway. So, or age of 27. So it's irrelevant. He has zero control over where he goes. And so all the cards are stacked in Verbeek's hands. It is irrelevant what everybody wants in this situation outside of Pat Verbeek. And Pat Verbeek is not going to trade a guy like him. Like, look how long he held on to Zegras.
I know.
You think he's just going to dump McTavish? No. And that's the thing.
Unless he learned from the Zegras things, like, we held on to him for nothing. We didn't get what we wanted, so let's not do that again.
If you trade McTavish, you get substantially weaker in your lineup, right away. Which they don't want to take a step back. They don't.
McTavish is better than Zegras, right? Like 1v1. I would prefer McTavish over Zegras all day.
Yes, personally. All day, every day. Okay. All day, every day. All day, every day. And I think the reason is very simple, is that he's still on this upward slope. Like, he had a crazy end of the season. It was almost a point per game. I don't think Verbeek is in the rush that a lot of other teams are. Like, it's the same. Other teams can start turning around and being like, is the situation souring in Montreal with Laine Hudson and the Montreal Canadiens? They were eligible to sign him to an extension as soon as July 1st, and they haven't done it. Well, what's going on?
Right.
And then you could easily make that conversation, but it's a non-issue. Why? Because what's going on. And the reality is the Canadiens aren't necessarily in a rush. They want to play it out, have conversations, see what's happening, and see where things are at. And if they feel like, how much more can Laine Hudson really earn if he has a good season next season, they're willing to play the cards and see, like, maybe he replicates the season, maybe he has a sophomore slump that maybe impacts his season and they can sign him to a better contract mid-season because of that. Like, there's all kinds of negotiation that goes into it. The same applies here. So I don't necessarily think that the Mason McTavish stuff, like, I understand, but it's the name. It's smoke to fire. I think that could he eventually be traded from Anaheim? Yes. Do I think he's going to be traded or successfully offer sheeted this summer? I do not. And so that requires the Canadiens to rethink the way that they're going to be working their second line, because in my opinion, I don't know that people would be as open to doing the trades that would necessarily be needed to be made to secure Mason McTavish out of Anaheim. Like, it would probably cost you Gooley. Like, it would probably cost you Gooley and then.
Yeah, and then I agree with that.
And so you take a massive step back, and then this is going to rile up all kinds of Canadiens fans. But if that happens, then the Canadiens have no choice but to extend Mike Matheson. And so,
well, now I'm more inclined to be out then if that scenario that plays itself out. No disrespect to Matheson, who I really like, but
and I just don't see people being behind that. Right player, wrong time in terms of what the Canadiens have to offer. And I think that's the point, is that the Canadiens are going to get to a point where they're going to have NHL-ready assets to be able to trade within the next year. Right now, they're not proven. They're not proven enough that you can make that kind of a move. Yeah. And, first of all, for all Canadiens fans, if the Canadiens trade for Mason McTavish, the Crosby dream dies. Are you really willing to give up the dream? Now I'm just trolling.
I hadn't really thought about. I hadn't thought about that angle.
But there is a very real angle that the Canadiens.
I'm thinking about it seriously, and the answer is no. No, I'm
So
not willing to risk that.
this is where I stand on this. Jeff Gorton specifically told us that he expects the trade market to shake loose again around
Yeah.
American Thanksgiving in a serious way when teams are out of it and they're going to be trying to sell off faster to get into a more realistic run at Gavin McKenna, in the top of the 2026 draft. There's a sense of that. The parity that forced teams to not make trades is going to create a situation where they're going to be like teetering on the edge, right? A lot of teams are teetering on the edge of a crossroad and they're trying to buy themselves a little bit more time. But if they stumble out of the season, like Nashville did last year, well, they're going to sell off a couple of pieces like Nashville did, right? With Carrier and putting Dante Fabro on waivers and stuff like that. I feel like the same. I've been told that the expectation is that on steroids in November, specifically because there was such a level of inactivity and a push for player. But if you're going to, call the season, right? If you're like one of the teams that just not in it come end of November, well, then you're going to put roster players available that weren't necessarily available for futures on the dot. And I think that's when, I took that as, oh, okay, you're not expecting to make the big splash this summer. There may be a trade for sure, and they have to get under the cap. But I don't necessarily see the Canadiens being the kind of team that's going to offer sheet of Mason McTavish. There's a lot that can go wrong. And giving an unprotected 2026 first can long haunt a team if they run into injuries and give them a lottery pick.
Well, what if I dropped you right now into Martin St. Louis' office, right? And let's pretend for a second in MSL's office, he has the big whiteboard up there, and he's got his first line. He's got Caulfield, he's got Suzuki, he's got Demidov there. He's got line number 2. He's got Slafkovsky on 1. He's got Demidov on 2. He's got his third line filled out. He's got his fourth line maybe filled out. His D pairings and his goalie tandem, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does his second line look like today on that drawn up depth chart? Who is occupying the 2 slots that you and I and the marketplace probably have different views on today?
Yeah, you see, you got to go with complementary players. And the way that I see it is I think Patrik Laine will slide down to the third line.
Really? Wow.
Simply because that second line is going to get caved on the face-off circle.
Correct.
Caved at 5-on-5 even strength. Do you want to put Demidov in that kind of a situation? Personally speaking, no. Because then you're basically putting him at a disadvantage at every start, no matter defensive or offensive zone starts. And Lord have mercy if there's an icing call, right? So you want to put Demidov and Dach in a situation where they could potentially be thriving. There is a reason why the Montreal Canadiens had an analytical analysis of their forward core and realized that they really needed a player that was strong on puck retrieval, strong on straight line shots, strong on release, strong on the boards.
Right.
So that's why they identified a guy like Zach Bolduc. Right. Bolduc is exactly the kind of guy that fits all of those things, who's currently working on his left-hand faceoffs. There's a reason for that. Kirby Dach is a right shot. Kirby Dach takes the strong side, his right side, and then the lefty would take the left side. And that's why that combination works really well. The other way they can go about this, and this would be the how do I say this? Not the boring way, but the predictable way, is that Alex Newhook would be the winger next to Kirby Dach and Ivan Demidov, and they would go back to doing that combo. And then you'd have a third line of Patrik Laine, Jake Evans, or you name it, whoever you want, and a guy like Zach Bolduc. And so that could be your offensively inclined third line, and then your fourth line would be Gallagher, Anderson, and if that's the case, Veleno or Oliver Kapanen.
And I'll tell you right now, brother, as I've drawn it up myself, that's how I have it today. I've got Newhook and Dach and Demidov as line number 2. And again, I'm not saying that's because that's what I think is in the best interest of the Canadiens. I think that will get them off to a better start. I just don't think I mean, if you watch the games, you don't need me to spell it out. Patrik Laine right now, based off of what we saw last year, I don't think he's got it to keep up as a number 2 winger. situationally on the power play, first wave all day, every day, for sure.
I'd even argue that.
But I also want I'm a fan of allowing guys to work their way up. I'm not saying Bolduc doesn't deserve to be given an opportunity to win the second line role. That's what training camp is for. But part of me wants to keep him a little bit hungry. I subscribe to the theory from the experts that have reported back on Bolduc that he's only scratching the surface. That's fine. Let him keep scratching. Let him keep going there, and let's see if a more air quote professional line of Newhook and Dach could be somewhat of a way to make October less challenging, and let's see what happens after they can survive the first month of the season.
Yeah, I kind of agree in terms of, being able to put your players in the best possible situation and kind of let them thrive early on. I personally think Bolduc is the best fit for that second line.
Okay.
But I can understand you not wanting a sophomore, a rookie, and a Kirby Dach on your second line. You're going to want a little bit of assurances. So that's why I could see a guy like Newhook go there and then have Bolduc and Laine kind of, on the third line with, insert center here. And I feel like that could work until they run into injuries, in which case they're going to have to redo everything.
16 back-to-backs, baby. I'm a little concerned about the back-to-backs and the condensed schedule as it relates to injuries.
Well,
let's be real.
But that also benefits younger rosters, and the Canadiens have the youngest roster in the NHL.
Good counterpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, young bodies can handle back-to-backs a little easier. You could just ask all the young AHLers out there that perform much better on the second back-to-backs than their veteran counterparts. So when you look at, the way that they would build it out, my only thing, and I think this is the key here when we're talking about that second line, is you could really play around with that roster. The one thing I will say with Patrik Laine is that we didn't see the best of Patrik Laine last season. Right. This is a guy that did not hit the ice last summer at all because he was in the program and still had an injury that he was dealing with. Comes back, gets his knee almost blown out, rushes back to the Canadiens lineup in December, and visibly slower. A full off season of training for him. I'd be very interested to see, because obviously last season he was just like getting back into it, and he played really well the first couple of the first handful of games. But a full season of training, a contract year, I have a funny feeling that Patrik Laine, at least to start, may surprise people. At least to start. What I would, however, say is I would remove him from the top power play wave, simply for the reasoning of such. Patrik Laine would be the weapon on the top power on the second power play wave. He would be the guy. You'd have Noah Dobson at the point. You'd have Zach Bolduc in the bumper, right? Whoever you want to put in front of the net, probably an Alex Newhook or a Kirby Dach. And then you fill out between the other two, between one or the other, you fill out the right circle, and that would be your second power play wave. And that second power play wave right off the bat would be more dangerous than any second power play wave the Canadiens have put out since 2021.
Well, I agree. To me, it's 4 quarters for $1. You and I 2 weeks ago were talking about realistically having 2 PP1s. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, one will be PP1, one will be PP2, but the talent-wise, you can have 2 legitimate top power play units spread across your 2 waves.
I just felt like the Canadiens were more dangerous when they played that hybrid diamond formation.
I agree.
In game 4 and 5 of the playoffs against Washington, because you have Caulfield and Demidov with shooting ability. Hudson is working on a shot as we speak, because that was probably his biggest weakness. That can distribute the puck. Nick Suzuki can basically rove wherever he wants on a power play, and then you have that net front presence in Slavkovsky, who's gotten much better at deflecting pucks and taking up space and clearing out the garbage. I think that unit in and of itself would get all the focus from the opposition, leaving the second wave to deal with the secondary defensive units, and I think that's where they could take advantage.
Well, you talk about Lane Hudson working on a shot. It reminds me, watch this guy come back like Crosby. Oh, I can't win the Rocket. Oh, I don't win enough faceoffs. One full offseason corrects both of those things. Watch Lane Hudson come back in the fall of 2025 shooting the puck like he's Al freaking McInnes or something. You know what I mean? He's
Probably not Al
really
McInnes, but
probably not.
I think he could definitely, he's definitely, the way that I see it, it's all about technique, putting yourself up open for a point shot, being a little less
Yeah.
hesitant when you receive it for like a catch and release kind of situation. This is all things that comes with practice and experience, so I'm not worried. But as it pertains to the second line, again, going back to it, I think it's also about, creating a situation where everybody on that line has the ability to grow. I think it's the reason why the Canadiens are still looking for a top six piece, because ideally they would want someone established on that line that has a consistency of performing in a top six role. In a situation where they can't, at the end of the day, and this is kind of what I say to everybody, Ivan Demidov made Alex Newhook look very good in the games that they played together, much better than he did prior to his arrival with the team. I feel like he can do that for Kirby Dach. And I feel like if you can get Kirby Dach with confidence, I've seen Kirby Dach play with confidence live, he can be a dominant player. So it's about consistency, it's about health. But if Kirby Dach could even reach a 50-point, season with the Montreal Canadiens, it does two things. It gives the Canadiens a legitimate option for a number 2 center, but it also gives the Canadiens a legitimate option for a trade piece for a legitimate number 2 center. And I think that's what the Canadiens are kind of banking on, is that it provides organizational value off the ice as well. And that's what they're looking to do. So best to not, it's not about putting all your top scorers on one line, but putting all your players in a position to succeed. So really kind of going to get that. I don't think the Canadiens are going to go 2C this summer. I personally don't see it, just given the overall amount of competition for centers. The Nazem Kadri rumors, not happening according to what we've been told. Canadiens are not interested in a player of that age at this time. The Leafs maybe, but the Canadiens are not. And so the Canadiens are clearly looking for a specific fit in that role or a stopgap for Michael Hage. But the idea to me is invest your time in Kirby Dach, who is also going into a contract year, and seek to benefit from that either by keeping him long-term and developing him to a 2C or trading him.
Yeah, let's see what the fire is, man. You've been called out, Kirby Dach, 10 goals in 57 games, 22 points last season. I mean, all eyes on Kirby Dach. All eyes on Marco D'Amico. You can follow him at MN D'Amico with RG Media.